This is intended for over 18s. Please gamble responsibly, and when the fun stops, stop. Welcome, guys, to another episode of the Dream Spin podcast, brought to you in association with SBC Media and Affiliate Leaders. In this episode, we're very lucky to have two great guests, Stuart from Playzido and Light Wonder, and Steve from Light Wonder. This episode, we're going to be talking about the role of aggregators and distributors for new and smaller studios trying to break into the market. What the partnership between Playzido and Light Wonder looks like, the role of studios and their role with operators. We're going to touch upon different markets and regulations, and we're going to look towards the future, what the future looks like for their business, smaller studios, and other exciting things. So hopefully we've got a bit of an action-packed podcast, lots of questions, two good guests. Will's obviously joining me again. We've got Stuart and Steve from Playzido and Light Wonder. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves first and foremost.
You want to go first?
I'll go first. Yeah, I'm Stuart Banks. I'm the CEO of Playzido. Do I need more than that at this stage? Or is that
Easy. That's easy.
Quick intro.
Yeah.
Steve Mays, I'm the Senior Director of Partnerships at Light Wonder. So I run our partner business. So every partner that connects to our aggregation business comes through me and my team.
Nice. One of the first things where we'll start, we get asked this a lot. When we told our community and announced that we were launching a studio, we said we're launching through Playzido and Light Wonder, or Light Wonder or Playzido. So before we get into your journey of Playzido and starting it and how that merged with Light Wonder, do either of you want to sort of summarize maybe the difference or how is it one of the same now? How do we split that up? Because we get asked that a lot.
Yeah, it's changing all the time, the answer to that question. But Light Wonder in this context is the route to market, right? With Light Wonder is the aggregation platform that works with all different operators and all different game providers. We're the guys in the middle that's helping get that content to market. Playzido is a business that Light Wonder acquired that is going to accelerate working with studios like Dream Spins that need a platform partner. It's all going to leverage the Light Wonder distribution and scale. So Playzido is a sort of independent business that taps into that marketplace with new studios coming to market and accelerates, complements what we already do from a Light Wonder perspective.
Just answer the question.
Do you want to just give a little idea of the scale of how many partner people we have on board at Light Wonder now then? Like if you include all the studios under through Playzido, how many are we talking about? So
Light Wonder's live with 550 operator brands across 34 regulated markets. We've got 85, 90 studios live on the platform, various different scales. We're bringing on 15 to 20 new studios every year. So by the end of the year, we're going to be north of 100 studios on the platform, 5,000 games. That's the big numbers. Yeah,
big, nice. And Stuart, how did you end up with Light Wonder? Tell us a bit about the Playzido journey story, where it all started.
Yeah, it's a long story.
Is it a separate podcast?
It's a separate podcast. Look, I started Playzido 7 years ago now. The original concept behind it was three companies had come together. So Endemol, who are a TV production company, they have Deal or No Deal, MasterChef and Peaky Blinders and all that sort of stuff. They were basically going to bring their IP to the table. They'd already had some successful hits with Deal or No Deal historically in the market, both online and offline. But they wanted a more cohesive way of bringing those games into the marketplace. Now they got together with two technology companies, a company called Black Cow, who have effectively built some like proprietary RGS gaming technology, quite geeky, but it's like, the stuff that sits behind the platform. And then a company called Ingenuity, who are a big kind of games development company out predominantly in India. And those three companies have basically come together. I came in when it was a sort of piece of paper and a kind of idea and concept. We spent probably about a year and a half getting off the ground, getting our licenses, getting banking in place. And it's unbelievably hard, by the way, to get banking in place for a gaming company in the UK. That took about a year in its own right. And effectively, we got off, I think we launched our first game. We're a company called BetBright, who are now bust.
Were you connected with BetBright?
BetBright were our first ever launch.
I do remember them because they were big. Well, so big. They sportsbook in Ireland, right?
Yeah, exactly. They got behind us, and that was the first ever game. And shortly after that, we launched with like the Leo Vegas guys in the UK, who were called Rocket X at the time. And effectively, we just built some momentum. We started to integrate into more and more aggregators. So even though we were like, the whole idea behind Playzido was, so part of it was to build the kind of the Endemol portfolio up. So, build all the Deal or No Deal games, and or they had ambitions around all their other TV IP, etc. But then quite early on in the process, we decided that it was going to be an open platform, right? So we were going to take games from like newer, new to launch game studios and start to bring them to market. So we had like 3 or 4 studios in the kind of the first sort of cohort of studios. And, I'm not gonna lie, it was hard work, like very, very hard work building a platform business in a market where, you're effectively competing with very big companies with very big bankrolls. And we were never like a particularly well-funded business. We were trying to do it, on a fairly shoestring budget, to be honest. And the whole idea was that we were going to kind of like build this momentum behind the Endemol piece, and that would get us and open the doors into the operators, right? So we did integrations into iSoftBet and Paraplay and iForum, Playtech, etc. And then effectively, probably about 3 years ago, we started talking to Steve over at Light Wonder, who I'd worked with previously and previous lives. I come 20 years in gaming and had been an operator for like 15 of those years, so slightly less, 13. And so we'd crossed paths back in the day. And, I think it was quite obvious fairly on in like the conversation that there was something more strategic in the conversations than perhaps just like us plugging our games into their platform and, launching as a new game supplier. Because effectively, we had this cohort, 40 or 50 games on the platform that we wanted to get live via L&W. But, L&W are an enormous business, right? But also they have, development constraints like everyone else. Like they've got big ambitions to build games. They're operating in God knows how many countries globally. And, in order to satisfy that demand, you really need to have as many avenues open as possible to build content. And so that's kind of where Playzido came into the conversation. And we were like, look, we've got capacity and our platform is very new technology, very agile, very quick to develop games on. So how can we help support you guys in fulfilling some of your ambitions alongside what we were doing in the core business? And then, the conversation then sort of developed into, well, look, this is more than just a relationship. This is something that should go to the next level. And we started to have conversations around acquisition probably 2.5 years ago. And, the deal got done in end of April 2022. So we're
nearly 2 years.
Just past 2 years.
Just past 2 years.
Just had our anniversary. And look, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. Like when you get acquired, we obviously had a very startup entrepreneurial kind of methodology within the business. We were, used to operating independently and with autonomy. And, there's always a concern that when you get acquired, that all of that goes out the window, right? You could become consumed in this big, like vast corporate piece. But the reality is that Light Wonder have done, we were the 4th company they acquired in a very short period of time. And I think it's testament to, Dylan Slaney, who's the CEO of iGaming at L&W, that they've broadly allowed, I think very high up his priority list was for the companies that they bought and acquired in, they didn't interfere with like the DNA of those businesses, because like the minute you interfere the DNA, effectively, all the reasons and rationale you had for buying the company in the first place started to fall away. Exactly. So, to all intents and purposes, we've been kind of left to our own devices, albeit with like the support this big kind of, corporate machine that also gives us really invaluable support around, compliance and legal, partner side of the business, gives us access into like operators and markets that we could never have dreamed of, right? So, a stat that's quite sort of interesting, and it's just sort of emblematic of what's happened in the last 2 years. So when we got acquired, like 99% of our revenues came from the UK market. Like we really just had UK licenses and we did very, very little elsewhere. Like this month, 40% of our revenues come from the UK market. Like,
huge turnaround in a short space of time.
Huge turnaround. Our business is, L&W have invested very heavily in Playzido. So when we got acquired, we had 17 full-time members of staff and now we're at 52. So again, like it's a seismic change to do in that short period of time, right? That's a dramatic change. And those, that investment has allowed us to build more content, to go into more markets, to get more operators live. And I'm not going to lie, like the numbers are following, right? Like we're growing like a ridiculous rate, frankly. It's quite sort of like, some of it's a bit like hold on to the sides of the chair and
embrace it.
I mean, that's interesting. Like, because Steve, obviously as well, like this is it's a two-way relationship, and obviously it's quite a bit of a turbulent time because lots are changing. Even like, so in the last 2 years, a lot's changed in the, in the landscape of gambling in the UK and all over the world. Like, so it makes that sort of relationship even more challenging when you've got like a moving landscape around you with regard to regulation and what's allowed in different places.
Yeah, 100%. And that's kind of why this partnership and the acquisition of Playzido just made sense because, as a game provider, when you're trying to expand and go into new markets and, manage all of the operational overhead and compliance and all the requirements to get across all these different markets, it can consume the business, right? And you kind of don't, you want your resource focused on building great products and great content, right? That's what's exciting for any studio, right? So Light & Wonder's, built up years of experience. We've got people localized in all of these different markets. We've got people with relationships with regulators. These are big teams that we've kind of built up over the years, and Playzido, as any game provider on the platform, can tap into that, right? So that's why Playzido's seen that accelerated, growth since we've acquired the business. But it doesn't just happen to Playzido. We work with lots of game providers that get the same access, right? We've got dedicated teams that will just purely focus on expanding game providers into markets across all the different regions. So that's ultimately what we're there to do. That's our purpose, really. We should simplify the complexity of going into a new market so that as a game provider, you don't need to worry about that, really. You know that you can get the information from Light & Wonder and you can get fast access to these markets and these operators.
Just to add to one thing to that, like in terms of like aggregation companies in the industry, like there really isn't anyone that's competing on the scale that Light & Wonder are, like in terms of like the amount of markets they're operating in. And from experience, having gone through this journey over the last couple of years, like the complexity that, operating globally pulls onto a business is enormous, right? Particularly in the gaming sector where regulations are pretty intense in most markets. And that it's a big challenge for any game supplier to try and navigate that. And I think like where we saw ourselves from a Playzido perspective was being able to, there's lots of talented game suppliers in the market wanting to build their own games and develop their own content. But the reality is like to operate that on a global scale, you need to have like a big compliance resource. You need to understand every nuance of every market and what you can and can't do. And the only way to do that is to work with a company, and even Playzido needed Light & Wonder to be able to do this, right? So it's about trying to give yourself the muscle to be able to operate on those levels, because there's big revenue potential and everything on a global basis, but frankly, like small suppliers and small like embryonic game suppliers can't do that themselves, right?
No, exactly. And I think when that was for us one of the biggest attractions. We spoke to Rob Proctor, I think like 2 years prior, and we were talking about our ideas to launch a studio and build games, and maybe going on to some of the, won't necessarily name some of the other platforms and aggregators. And he said, well, hold your horses. We have all these licenses, massive distribution, but we want to grow that side and we're looking for a partner to help, really on the tech side, like you said, because, despite the size of our business, we're probably not agile enough to facilitate these smaller studios and compete, hence where that acquisition came in. And the timing was almost perfect because you said before you sign anything, we're literally a couple of months away from announcing this deal. I think it happened just after ICE a few years back, didn't it? You announced it. So yeah, April. So, we must have met in February. So he said, hold your horses. And then obviously the attraction for us was obviously the size of Light and Wonder. We weren't so familiar with Playzido, but you don't get much bigger than Light and Wonder. So that was, from our perspective, really interesting. From your, from the Playzido side of things, how did things change short term? Because you went from building some of your own games to saying, actually, we are now going to be more of a distributor and almost drop that side of the business, right? Was that because of like the conflict of interest of maybe doing your own games and then releasing others, or just from a business point of view, it made more sense to focus on one thing where you could specialize in?
Yeah. So the business plan behind Playzido was not to build our own games, right? But the reality was that a combination of kind of Endemol and Playzido ended up building this kind of cohort of games that we then sort of the plan always was to position ourselves in the market where we had enough distribution to attract the most exciting, high potential studios in the market, right? So it was always about how do we become in the, set ourselves up in the middle where we can support these like fledgling studios that are, with great ideas and innovation behind them, and how can we find that? But the key, like when you talk to any studio in the market, right, there's a few things they need, right? They absolutely must have access to operators, access to markets, and access to a development roadmap, right? Those are the three like bread and butter things that you need. And we had access to the roadmap, but like distribution is unbelievably difficult, unless you have a very, very big partner to work with, you cannot do it. And like if you look at like Playzido's model before acquisition, we had a big problem with it, right? Because there were too many mouths to feed. Right? Playzido were trying to make some money by allowing game suppliers to build games on, but we weren't really going to be doing like direct integrations into operators. So we were always going through one of these other aggregators, whether it was Light and Wonder, iSoftBet, all these guys. But the reality is that they were taking a cut as well, and we were having to pass both like this kind of double cut down to the suppliers. And so really it becomes a sort of a model that doesn't really work, right? And that, the reality was that it was very hard for us to attract like the really exciting game studios to Playzido, particularly in the kind of the first, the 5 years that we were operating before we got acquired. Obviously, once we were acquired, we don't need to have 2 platform fees because there isn't another platform, it's just one. Yeah. So that removes that. And our distribution potential has gone through the roof, right? We've gone into America, all the States. Pretty much we've unlocked the entire Canadian market now, all the lotteries and et cetera, et cetera. So, the revenue earning potential for studios is unparalleled compared to what it was previously, which then results in, a big queue of studios wanting to come and help work with us, which is an amazing place to be. And, something that I'm buzzing about generally. Because
did that happen quickly almost when that got announced and people saw the Light and Wonder? Were people knocking on your door? Did that take some time?
I think it's taken time.
I think we kind of deliberately didn't go too hard on like chasing down these studios, because we'd had, as like pre-acquisition of Playzido, we'd had dialogue with lots of different studios that we wanted to work with to build onto the platform, but we always knew we had a limit to how many studios we could bring on from pre-acquisition. But once we acquired Playzido, the focus initially was like, let's close the gaps in terms of markets and operators. Like, we've got the studios, let's bring a few studios on, but let's not overwhelm ourselves to bring studios in that we can't service, and let's make sure we can get that distribution maximized, which we've kind of done now. And then the most recent shows, we've been much more proactive. We've reached out to studios, and we're actively talking to more studios now to bring them on. But there's always going to be a level of decision making around that, because we're not looking to just bring any studio on. There's always going to be factors that we consider, because we want to bring the right studios on that fit what we're looking for, that we fit what they're looking for.
You need sort of long-term relationships and be aligned as well. Again, I'm not going to name others, but maybe been guilty of 5 or 6 studios they've had, and a year or two later they disappear off their platform because it just hasn't worked, or they're taken on the wrong ones. I haven't been aligned. I guess from your point of view, it's not a case of, well, we've got 10 people that want to join that can build games, but ultimately we're not going to say yes to all 10. They've got to tick certain boxes.
Yeah. We can't, frankly. Like there is a limit on the amount of studios you can bring on board, and like if you throw too much into the mixer at once, then it starts to cause us problems operationally. Like, but that said, we're probably bringing on anywhere between like 4 and 5 partners a year at the moment, so it's not insignificant, right? Like, we are definitely scaling. It comes sort of fundamentally down to the amount of game capacity at Playzido, but we'll build and release like close to 70 games this year. Next year we'll release over 100. So there is, you can't support that many studios without increasing your development bandwidth, which means kind of going operationally into the business and working out how to do that, right? So, but there's a lot of very exciting studios in the market, and like there's big regions that haven't even developed yet. Right? Like, I'll tell you, we always talk about it internally, but there's very few studios coming out of the US at the moment, and despite the fact the US market is broadly exploding in terms of scale, we expect there to start to be more studios
popping up, literally stateside. Yeah.
But yeah, you guys got in a good time though, man. Because like, because the queue's getting big outside. Yeah. We're like having to.
Well, people did ask that question. One of the questions was, a startup with, from our perspective, with no game built before. A lot of studios you've worked with or that are part of the platform, coexisted. They might have been on another platform. Us coming completely fresh. I guess one of the questions would be, what made you maybe sort of take a risk on us? What attracted you guys to sort of be aligned with our vision of doing things?
I mean, you guys are very unique in terms of your background, but I think in general, when we're looking at new studios, first and foremost, it's about the people behind the business, right? So do we think that we can work in long-term partnerships with these guys to build a successful business in collaboration with the studio? And that comes down to the people, the founders. What's their vision for the studio? What are they looking to achieve, and does that align to us? What type of content are they looking to build? Do we think that's going to fit with the players and the markets and operators that we're working with? That's the starting point. We really try to understand the studio, like what's the driver behind the studio, and where do we fit into that? Because we can take any studio to market. The distribution is there. We can scale any studio, but we need to believe in the studio, right? We need to be like, we think they've got great content and they've got a great product, and that might not be day one. But one thing I've learned is my opinion doesn't really matter on games. Right? Everyone's got lots of opinions, but ultimately you never know until that game goes out onto the market and the players start playing it. You just don't know. So you have to kind of start with, okay, have these guys got like the knowledge, the experience? Is there an angle that we kind of believe in? And then you back it, right? And you guys have obviously got lots, your streaming background, you know what players, you're doing it every day, right? So you're
in the mix.
I mean, that's interesting actually, because that's a question to both of you, because obviously potentially this is just kind of like an industry-wide question then really, because certain other aggregators might want to sort of like filter down a little bit of pressure to the studios underneath them and say, look, we really think we want to see a little bit more of this mechanic in, we want to see a little bit more of that mechanic in. Are you actively saying that you don't think that you want to do that? That's not a position that either of you have ever occupied, because you want to let kind of the providers do what they want? Or would you come back and be like, look, guys, we really want to see this in a lot of games. Try it,
It's a bit of both, right? Because obviously as a platform, we get visibility of all the content that's going out on the market, right? So we have lots of great insight. We can tell you what content's working well in by market, by operator, by game, the mechanics, the themes. We can give you all of that information. But fundamentally, I don't think it's for us to kind of control or stem innovation. Like, we want to encourage game providers to innovate and bring new products to market, but equally we want to balance that with like guiding studios to grow their revenues, right? Because there's kind of a balance, like what proportion of your roadmap is innovative new sort of content, and what proportion is safer content that, you know, is going to get you that base level of revenues with the operators.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, obviously we kind of sit in between the studios and the operators to a large extent. So like, we're out there talking to operators all the time. We obviously hear exactly what they are after. You know, some of it is relevant for studios. Some of it perhaps, you know, doesn't necessarily need to be sort of adhered to. But I think like Steve's exactly right. Like for us, like the way we see it is the studios are the sort of creative source here, right? We don't want to be interfering with that mix, but we think we can add some value to it. We think we can bring some insight, and we can perhaps, you know, give you the data points that you might be able to take off and use, but we're certainly not going to sit there and insist on it. Like, you know, everyone is in the business of trying to make these games successful. So the more we can like collectively collaborate on it and add value, the more we'll do it. But, you know, we make a particular point across our program, which I think some of the other sort of competitors don't do, where we're very let's say insistent on building bonds and relationships between studios and operators. Like, we don't want to be out there keeping you detached from your end customer. We want you to be talking to your end customer and getting, you know, direct back and forth. So we run lots and lots of studio days with pretty much all of our tier 1 partners. We'll have, you know, Sky come in, or we'll go and see BetMGM or FanDuel or DraftKings or wherever it might be. And we'll make sure, you know, we'll bring all of our studios with us, and we'll say, look, you know, you guys go and pitch your wares and also get as much like back and forth insight as possible. And we, you know, we try and look for as many opportunities as possible around that stuff, because we think it's very valuable for you guys not just to be building games behind the scenes, detached from your sort of like your core customer base.
Yeah, I think that's been amazing for us actually already to have that opportunity, because you may have opinions on games and what have you, but you know, you let the studios come up with that, and you'll say, well, actually, we're going to put you in front of the operators. They're the ones also with opinions, because they're the ones going to take the game. So actually hear from them. They might want this type of mechanic, and we'll sort of let you two be, but you facilitating that, you know, those relationships, those partnerships, you know, it's been really helpful when I guess it's a case of you sell into the operators, and then, you know, the studios themselves have to sort of back that up. But without, you know, from our point of view, without having, you know, sort of you guys behind us and the Playzido and Light Wonder brand, to even get in the door and speak to these operators and have that initial conversation or be taken seriously would be, you know, incredibly difficult to almost impossible. Whereas, you know, you really open those doors and have those relationships, and because you're already established and have the reputation with these guys, you know, they're willing to listen.
Yeah, there's a huge appetite from operators to talk to the studios directly as well, right? Because, you know, it's one thing for us, we can sell our products, we sell games all the time, but it's very different to hear from the people behind the product, right? How you talk about the product you've built and designed in a game is going to come across very differently to the way that we talk about games, right? And that's why we do that, because we want operators to get excited about you guys as a brand, as a game producer and the product. And the best way to do that is to put you in front of the operators, and then you hear directly, you know, what they want to see.
Just moving on a little bit from, you know, same sort of question Will asked and what you were talking about, you know, studios and maybe even like in the US, how there might not be so many studios coming out of that at the moment. Have you seen a trend, or are you starting to see, or maybe think there may be, you know, studios that will focus on certain markets more, you know, building games for a certain region and things like that?
I think yes, to an extent. I think the industry hasn't quite moved forward to that level yet. I think I definitely think there's studios that have a market focus, but that's not to say that they are just building games for a specific market. And I think, you know, you see it a bit more in essentially what we call the third party world, where like you've got like studios like WMG just pretty much building games entirely for the Italian market and stuff like that, and R. Franco and those guys. But like in terms of like the, you know, I guess the smaller kind of smallest new studios, just because of the revenue drivers behind having to create revenue, you've kind of got to go and make sure content gets out into pretty much most of the markets to give you the best chance of, you know, getting ROI on your games and, you know, effectively going off and investing that into your next content after that. So probably not quite there yet, but I think, you know, as the market matures and the revenue opportunities within certain markets increases, you know, for example, in a world where like more states open in the US, I'm sure there'll be more and more content providers that have almost building content entirely for that market. Because
are you ever, you know, because I mean, I'm looking here, all four of us, all from the UK, we obviously have like a real UK cultural history and how we think about gambling. Have either of you ever been surprised, you know, since you are moving in and kind of like getting a little bit more involved in these worldwide markets, have there been any sort of surprises with regard to like what works in other parts of the world that you just thinking that would not work in the UK?
I think it's changing. Like, I think there's always been a historical view of this is the type of content that works in the UK, in the US, Canada, Europe. I think as game provider distribution expands, right, you've got all the European, there's a big rush for everybody to go to the US, right? So we're starting to see the landscape of the type of content that can work in the US change. You know, there's always going to be content that's got a rich history in that market. Like in the UK, right, a lot of the retail games have always, you know, got a big following, but obviously we saw with COVID, there was a big switch, right? Players no longer go into the retail shop. Yeah. So they just got exposed to content they'd never seen before. And then off the back of that, you've seen content that maybe wouldn't have been as well received now, you know, much higher up the tables. And the same in the US, you see lots of European providers going in there that's performing well, you know, without naming the studios. You know, we know who they are. And I think that's changing all the time. We're constantly analysing that, looking at what types of games work well in different markets. But I don't think there's an answer to that question. It's very rare that a game provider hits every market. I think they sort of find something that works and that resonates in certain markets. But then...
And then on top of that, you've got like the regulatory sort of constraints anyway, that means that a game that may be successful in the UK, you know, because... you know, let's say bonus buys existed or didn't, you know, doesn't work, or spin speed in Germany or something. So actually you have games that possibly could or couldn't work, but actually bound by the regulation might determine what you can and can't do anyway. So even if a player's preference is there, they might not get exposed to it, and vice versa. Yeah,
they can't get the same player experience, right? Yeah. Like you could play the same game in different markets, and in some markets there's no auto spin, or you're capped at a certain spin level, or you know, you've got a spin second delayed. So it's very difficult to kind of really measure what's affecting that, whether that's the game, or is that the regulation, or is that the theme. You just don't know. It's very difficult. It's an ongoing thing, right? It's a question we ask all the time. Yeah. What is the recipe for a hit in these markets?
So boring question now, maybe not for a podcast, but on this subject, you know, you started Playzido, entrepreneurial, you know, and then grown in, you know, corporate environment. And now you've got regulations just change and always expanding. Is it hard sort of navigating partnerships with these rising sort of compliance, and like, has it slowed progress? Is it difficult to balance that excitement? You know, from a personal point of view, is it an extra headache? Do you get people in to take that off your shoulder because you're like, I didn't get into this gig to be dealing with? I don't have
enough people to take off.
Yeah.
No, look, I mean, I sort of alluded to it earlier, but like the complexity of running a business in global markets is unparalleled compared to like what we used to. You know, Playzido doesn't look like it used to 2 years ago, right? It's like way more complicated. Essentially, I've had to hire. I was very lucky to hire an amazing operations director who's come in and being able to, you know, take some of that kind of operational piece, because you can't run a business, particularly in North America, without having a strong operations function behind you, because so much of it is process driven. Playzido didn't even have any project managers. Now we've got, they're coming out our ears. Like, you've got to have a lot of these people in place in order to be able to push the process through the stage gates, right? So, we've gone from building 25 games a year to building 70 games. Like, that is complex as well. So all these things do have let's say, an operational burden associated to them. And the key challenge from a business management perspective is to try and make sure our processes and procedures are as slick as possible. And like, I guarantee that doesn't happen on day one, by the way. Like, as you scale, it creates lots of mess, lots of noise, lots of miscommunication, people not talking to each other, not informing each other. And then you have to kind of go and address each and everything, all the cracks that appear in your business as you grow it. You have to go through and glue them, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you can maybe allude to this, but we're experiencing that on a, tiny scale. When we first started and said we're going to build a game and had a time frame for it, and you put a time frame, and we didn't factor in just the the QA.
Yeah, there's loads of stuff there, isn't there?
Languages.
Just, a lot of it's inexperience, and a lot of it is inexperience, and a lot of it is just kind of like you have to. I mean, when you're trying to challenge yourself, or when you're trying to challenge yourself as a business, then I think that's just kind of inevitable. It's on a personal level and working in teams, whether they're small teams or bigger teams. If you're not having some problems along the way, then you're probably not trying hard enough. You're not pushing strong enough.
We get asked the question, regularly, when's the game coming out? Because we announced it, and actually, to an extent, the game was ready last year, but it was ready on our end. We didn't factor in, the integration, the first time integration that, I think especially some of our viewers are interested to know that the process behind actually, Playzido then taking game or Light and Wonder to fall under your license so it's compliant. You guys have to rebuild the game essentially. We can't just pass you our code.
Correct.
So some people, if you want to explain without, again, that could be a separate podcast, but like, the very high level detail of what needs to happen in that sense.
Yeah. So simplistically, the game's in two sections, right? It's the back end and the front end. Okay. Now the back end of the game is the engine, the maths, everything that dictates the results of the games. Now regulators care deeply about who built the back end, right? So if we want to put games under licenses that we either Light and Wonder or Playzido have, we have to physically have built that back end piece. Now, the front end client, the bit the customer sees and plays, and the creative drive behind it, and the framework, and the art, and the animation, that's the studio's IP, their creative process. We don't get involved in that piece. We get, we're the boring kind of engine part behind the scenes. We're like, if you imagine like a car analogy, you build a beautiful Ferrari chassis and you
do the engine, which is bloody important because it doesn't run without the engine, right?
the V12.
Yeah. But I think that, it's important for, we get asked this question a lot, and to explain that actually, in some sense, on the top level, the game had to be rebuilt. And it was our first time ever working with you guys. So working out processes and, definitely going into games 2 and 3, hopefully know how to sort of speed that up, what they're looking for, how to get that build done, not differently. So I think it was important just to touch upon that, because I don't think some people realize that actually sometimes when you go to an aggregator, what happens.
I think also when with that regulation means that when you're releasing a game, you're not releasing a game once and it goes live in all these markets at the same time. So that regulation adds additional. You're almost taking 6 months to release a game, because you'll launch the game in Europe and in the European markets. Then you'll get into this queues with each of the regulators in each of the US states and in Canada, and that's unpredictable at times, right? So you know when you can get it into the regulator, but you can never guarantee when it's going to come out of the regulator. You can't really set dates with operators until it comes back from the regulator. So, it's an ongoing process, and that's just one game, right? And then you add in multiple games, and that's where the aggregation and Playzido takes all of that complexity away, right? You guys,
for not transparency, but for some people to understand what are the extremities there without, an example, you could have a few weeks to months in queue in a regulator, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the rest. I mean, so a lot of regulators, particularly in North America, behave like the test houses do in the UK, right? So like a GLI. So it's like almost having to put your game and submitting it entirely into the regulator. They go and interrogate every single element of it, and they've got a big queue of games to get through anyway. So, those processes can be quite painful. And like, I think again for the sort of viewers, just like, I think people have a slight misconception about how quickly games are developed in this market.
100%.
Everyone thinks, we just knock it out. And do you know what? You were talking.
We probably did ourselves, didn't we?
I underestimated.
And you'll go and talk to, there's a lot of people in this industry that I consistently hear telling suppliers how quickly they can build their games. And I'm like, I've been doing this a while and it doesn't, it's not quick. Like it is, if to build a game properly in a professional way with all the checks and balances, the QA processes, certification, and getting it out globally to a good operator pool and, have a chance of getting pushed. The reality is like we kind of generally work around a sort of 9 to 10 month like development process from like start to finish. But I've seen games take longer. I've obviously seen games be done shorter than that as well. But, I think that's a reasonable time frame. And like, just to put it in context, like, so, I was talking about 70 games coming out on Playzido. We've got 50 games in some stage of development on Playzido at the moment.
Yeah.
Right? All in parallel. So imagine the head, the organizational challenge of doing something like that is quite.
And trying to get to the front of that queue, bloody difficult as well, and prioritizing and what happens, that's not easy.
Yeah. I mean, look, we try and like, in a world where we have, today we've got 12 studios actively building on Playzido, building their own content, and prioritizing and making sure that everyone has a fair crack at, our priority queues is really important to us. So it's, it's very important that, that each of the studios that we're working with have, a pretty equal chance of, building games and getting them out to market. Because, it's we fully appreciate, that we have a big debt of responsibility or a big responsibility to each of our studios because they are predominantly running their business entirely through our platform, right? So if we, depending on how we behave, has a direct impact on every single business that we work with. And I'm acutely aware of that. And, it's something that, we take very seriously and make sure that everyone, like I say, has a chance to get their games out to market, the chance to get their games onto big tier 1 operators. It's something we're very serious about.
Steve, have you enjoyed then these guys coming in and having, access to all these sorts of different studios in terms of flavor and, seeing different concepts and partners come through and having that side of things?
Yeah, it's been a massive game changer for us. I think obviously we've got, as we said at the beginning, we've got lots of studios that we work with, lots of different content providers, but I think the studios that we can bring through Playzido bring something very different. If you look at the range of studios that we're bringing in, with a lot of the content providers in the market are producing a lot of the same stuff, right? There isn't a huge amount of innovation. I think the studios that are coming through Playzido really, that's what they're tapping into. They all bring a very unique style of game, unique style of content. And when you see that, when you sit in the sessions that we run with the operators, where the studios get in front of those operators and present the content, it kind of tells a big story. The operators really welcome and look forward to those sessions, and they can work much more closely with those studios that are building games directly. They can have much more input into the types of games that you're building.
Yeah. It must be really exciting for the operator to, when you have these days, to actually see, like you said, that variety, different studios, different ideas, even down to like different look and feel and art. So for the operator to be able to also cherry pick as well, it really opens up for them what they can take on.
Yeah, I think I was an operator buying games for many years, and you used to just being given a set of content that you had no input into, and you'd obviously pick and choose the ones that you wanted to launch. But I think the world where we're working with like more boutique, newer game studios, there's definitely more potential to get involved in the creative process, and whether that's the kind of the maths level and volatility, etc., or it's directly into the design and creation process. There's more input from operators than ever before. There's no doubt about it.
And I think from a Light and Wonder perspective, it also opens up the opportunity for Light and Wonder to collaborate with those studios as well. So there's lots of things that are happening at the moment where we're working directly with the studios. Our own internal studios are working directly with the studios building onto Playzido to collaborate, build games in partnership. Lots of different things that we can do to expand our own roadmap, right? As that putting my Light and Wonder hat on.
Yeah, I mean, you might, and on that level, do you mean you could even go to a studio and say, look, we've got this concept, or do you want to do something here? Could you help with the development of this? Do you have ideas for your actual own games?
Exactly, yeah. And for new studios that are kind of building the business, right, that's an opportunity for an initial bit of investment from Light and Wonder, right? So we could pay you guys to build a game, right, that helps kind of fund.
Yeah, we'll do it.
We're free next Friday. Next Friday.
Cancel. I'm not busy for dinner tonight. So that takes us to the future. I guess we can sort of finish looking at a bit of the future plans for the next. You've already talked about 70 games there, but plans for the next few years and where you see things going and developing.
So not just in terms of games, but like more like generally operationally, what are the changes like, moving forward the next year? Obviously more games opens up a lot of new possibilities, but also there must be, what's planned away from the game level at a slightly higher level, moving forward.
I think one of the big focuses for us is how do we provide more self-service to the operators, right? So as we kind of increase the number of games, number of studios, number of providers we work with, that becomes an increasing challenge to sell that to the operators, and for the operators to consume that content. So we've got projects in flight now where we're building new websites, new tools, new self-service tools where operators can get to the point where they can go in and they can self-select, right? They can order games, they can buy games, they can select games, they can see roadmaps instantly without the need to get on calls. So it's just kind of really changing the way that we operate and the way that we engage with operators and partners, so that ultimately that they can consume more content and in the way that they want to, because everyone's, we're working across a global business, right? So we're based in the UK, trying to manage that with the US. How do we kind of transform the way we engage? And then how do we then layer on products and features on top of that, outside of the games? We announced a deal with the investment we've done in Flows, right?
I saw that a few months ago, yeah.
That's a good signal of where we're trying to go from a product perspective. So we've got marketing jackpots that's coming through Flows, and Flows really opens up lots of opportunities for us to build, promotional tools and many other things. So that's the kind of next iteration. We've got lots of content, we've got great games, we've got great studios. How do we elevate those games with the operators? And that's through products and features.
I think that to that point, if you use this sort of analogy, like imagine like the thousands of games available through Light and Wonder's various content sources. It's like, it gets used as a metaphor quite a lot. Like there's this kind of Netflix kind of concept of, how do you make sure the right content gets in front of the right customers, whether it's, in the right markets. I mean, just composing roadmaps, on a regional market basis is unbelievably complicated. Like, it doesn't sound like it should be, but it is. And, there's lots of tools that need to be developed, within Light and Wonder to be able to support that on a more kind of macro scale. And that's a big project that's going on at the moment within the business. So that's really important. I think, just purely from a kind of what the future looks like for Playzido and our platform, we've got a lot of market entrances still ahead of us. So yes, we've like the vast majority of the last sort of year and a half has been focused on North America, opening up Canada and all the States. But, there's still places within Europe that needs opening, and there's constantly evolving regulation, right? South Africa just opened, Brazil's regulating, et cetera, like, and each of these territories represent a new challenge. Like, and we hope desperately that more and more US states will open, because, there was, the reality is there's 3 big US states at the moment. There's New Jersey, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. There's a couple of other small ones, but the reality is, there's far more regulated sports markets than there are casino markets. And
what are we up to on the sports side?
Oh
You know?
gosh, I'm not well equipped to answer that.
double
I believe
digits,
I
that's
believe
all I
it's,
know.
it's definitely
12?
over 20. No, it's
Oh.
over 20.
It's over
definitely
20 now.
yeah.
Oh, so there's huge opportunity potentially for that.
Massive opportunity. So, you know, the gaming market in the US is kind of extraordinary, right? Like even in like developed or, you know, semi-developed markets like Michigan, it's growing at like 35% year on year. Like it's nuts.
That's insane,
right?
yeah.
And so, you know, there's huge growth within these individual states. But then obviously if you then start to think about what the world looks like in a world where, you know, 4 or 5 other states open, and, you know, I don't want to get too much into sort of like the politics of it, but like, you know, there is a theory in the market that if New York opens for casino, there will be a sort of, you know, a domino effect in some of the other states. So who knows what it looks like? I think like the general consensus is not for another year or so, but
Watch this space.
Watch this space. And like we need, you know, Light and Wonder as the leading, you know, or certainly amongst the leading companies within the US market have to be first to market in every state that opens. So like as and when it looks like it's going to happen, we will have to be there on day one. Like it's not non-negotiable. So
And we're very lucky that you've got, like you said, 34 regulated markets, right? Having that
very
scale
well
and
versed.
scope.
Lots of big compliance team, big licensing team.
Big.
And I think from a content perspective, the other side to that is obviously there's lots of slots content and table game content, but we hear all the time from operators that they're looking to kind of explore the different terminology used, arcade, sort of non-slots, non-traditional content.
Crash games.
Like
that,
you know.
Yeah. Let's talk about that quickly, because obviously, like, you know, Steve talked about diversity of content being like a key driver of what we do, and it absolutely is, right? So when we go and identify studios, we're looking for like how they can complement the overall kind of structure of our product. So, you know, we'll have people that specialize in jackpot games and Kenos and you know, people like Rogue who have
done some great, like, you know, some really fantastic.
Really interesting studio doing completely different stuff. So they're really interesting. Then we've got companies that support us on customized games. So if an operator wants, you know, an MGM branded game or FanDuel or whoever, they can support fully on that stuff. So we're always looking at like trying to sort of like add more and more studios that add those diversity, but Crash, I would say, and fast games tend to be the next ones that everyone's talking about, right? So fast games, like some people call them arcade games, but like anything from penalty shootouts to coin flips to taps to whatever they are. Like
in the markets that will allow it, I can completely see it because it's quick, it's young, it's, you want to say Gen Z, but you know, the education process may not need to be, you know, that long. They come in and, you know, get a flavour of something quite quickly.
There's a lot of chat about them being very complementary to the sports experience as well. So like trying to get people cross-sold over from the sports betting into like gaming products, or having those gaming products sit within the sportsbook app, and then effectively like being able to like play those games very quick and easy way, right? So, you know, they're very simple to understand, easy. And like Mines is a great example, right? So Mines obviously has done well in most markets, but, you know, it's absolutely tearing up trees in Ontario where it's launched. Like, and again, it's one of these, certainly in terms of like active customers and stuff like that, it's there's a demand for these.
I actually think that the UK may not shift in terms of the content, but because obviously there's no bonus buys and no autoplays and spin speed. And especially with our viewers, we see them, you know, loads of studios, very popular, but, you know, the average bonus 1 in 250, 300, might even be 400 spins. It's very tough. You know, they might have a session these days, half an hour, 40, but they don't get a bonus. So I actually think my prediction is that some of the games in the UK not necessarily become softer, but the idea of even triggering or waiting to a bonus round might disappear slightly, and the game itself will be a bit feature heavy, rich, and try and engage in just in that market. So I think, you know, could be wrong. I'm not saying we're building a game just yet for that, but I think it's really important to cater for each market in that respect. So like Crash we looked at a while ago and thought, yeah, that could be great, but for our audience in the UK, it's probably not right for demographic.
Yeah. And so like we've got crash providers, but we don't, or coming through, but we don't. I don't think we've got massive ambitions in the UK market for crash personally, but like there are big markets that love it, right? So it's an interesting one. Look, I think the regulations that are going on in the UK market obviously are going to start to have an impact on the types of games that can be successful, like, even dating back previously. And we'll have to see, where the market heads on that front. I think having this big pool of content studios and all with their own kind of creative take on it gives us a very good opportunity to at least toe dip into the different types of games, right?
Absolutely. And Steve, you were talking about some of the, tech side or flows. In terms of from a player perspective and being able to add the promotional tools, so, we see some studios have replays on games or leaderboards or, just some of the, the in-game stuff or the extra layers. Is that something, we might see from sort of Light and Wonder roll out, in a development point of view, having those sort of extra tools available to players and what have you?
Yeah, there's a roadmap of exactly those products coming out over the next 12 months, leaderboards, tournaments, prize drops, promotional tools, all of those types of features. I think the fundamental kind of strategy from Light and Wonder is we're going to build a cohort of products ourselves that are going to be built for Light and Wonder products, and then we'll expose some of those products to game providers, and then we also make sure that the platform supports their products as well. So if you're a game provider that's got your own platform and you've built your own feature, that will work in exactly the same way coming through the platform. So Scribe, rain features, or drops and wins from Pragmatic, all these types of features. Yeah. It's the same philosophy as we do with games. We don't want to be prescriptive around types of features that are available on the platform. If anything, you want to be able to enable game providers to build new features, and that's really one of the conversations that's happening with flows. Like with having conversations with game providers with flows, and what are the types of features and promotional tools you want to build, and can flows help you do that in a more effective way? Because everybody's got these big roadmaps for products, but they often that stuff often slips down the list.
Yeah, it's hard.
You're trying to build games, then a new regulation comes in, so that the stuff it almost becomes a nice to have. So you never quite get to some of those features, and that's where flows can help. Like it builds the. I'm not a tech person, but it helps to kind of alleviate that problem. It can allow you to build those features.
So Steve, talking about product and innovation, different tools. Stuart, anything that you're seeing? On a mechanic point of view, we're seeing stuff in the market, a lot of talk about not streaming, but like shared gaming experiences and maybe even multiplayer and things like that. But we won't mention them. We met a studio the other day that showed us a product that was really interesting. We're looking forward to streaming that. Won't announce that yet. So, you guys come across that?
Yeah. So, so look, we've been working on a multiplayer product solution for the last 2.5 years, to be honest. Wow. So it's been in development with a company called Playzido, who are a Canadian business, who is specialist in this sector, and that's their entire business is focused around multiplayer games. Predominantly, their business is focused around building kind of next generation table games with like multiplayer experience. However, we've about 1.5 years ago, we kicked off projects to help bring some of Light and Wonder's top performing IP into a multiplayer slots product. And I'm very pleased to say, towards the end of that project in terms of getting it to market. So we're a few months away from launching it. We're actually going to launch in Canada to start with, but it'll be coming to the UK market not too long after that. It's a very cool product.
And it's going to start with some of the titles that players will be familiar with.
Yeah. So the first game is Raging Rhino, which is one of Light and Wonder's top performing IP from back in the day. And essentially it's got kind of a community bonus to it, right? So you play independently, but you play in this kind of pod of players. And then as and when anyone within your pod hits a bonus round, you all collectively go in together. There's kind of interaction between the players, so they can all contribute to the sort of like this, how the bonus plays out, and then effectively they all win in the bonus.
Win together.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
From our point of view, not Dreamspin, but from the streaming perspective and Fruity Slots and Hidden Slot, that could be great for the community, for us to be playing a game where the viewers can sort of share that experience and take part in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I think look, there's been a number of multiplayer attempts in the market. Like different people have gone in through different approaches. I think the version that we have is different to what else is in the market, and I think that it's been a labour of love, but it's also what I would refer to as an MVP, right? It's like, this is, the opportunity to innovate around multiplayer is huge. This first version is great, and I think I'm really excited about how it's going to perform. But I think there's going to be like really exciting things in the industry around this in the future.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It launches as something completely new, and the innovation, and 3 years down the line, you look back and think, gee, how was that the first version of it? And how things evolve so quickly, and all of a sudden you're in some immersive like game where you're chatting or seeing other people, and you're on your mobile, and hard to predict what things look like in 5 years.
The reason I'm bullish about this is because I think it's got a nice mix of sort of innovation and pure gameplay, right? So like when you're spinning in the main reels, you're spinning independently, right? So you would do any other slot. So for customers, it's not going to be like this huge like, God, what's going on type moment. It's going to be like you're going to play a game normally, but then it's about bringing in those kind of multiplayer elements to it. And like the bonus round is obviously an easy one to kind of pick off first, but need to just stop at that, right? And there's chat elements, and you can see what other people are doing, and I think when you see it, you're going to be impressed. I think it's a really nice product.
Look forward to that. Well, we know our audience like Raging Rhino.
Yeah, so, big fans of Raging Rhino. So yeah, that should be good. Look forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So plenty to look forward to. I think that wraps up this episode of the podcast. Again, walked you through the affiliate leaders and Casino Beats and SBC guys. Thanks, Stuart and Steve, for joining us.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been fun, and hopefully, I'll say next time we get together, we'll be getting our game out on your platform, and maybe doing round 2 of this next year, seeing how things have gone.
You guys.
Yeah,
We'll
have a debrief.
No, we can't wait.